Welcome back. This time I'll be going over the first impressions of White Mage, and spoiler alert, I am feeling pretty satisfied with the job. White Mage has always been a job that has had a strong focus on GCD heals as its strength. We can argue if this is good or bad design another time, but for now let's try to keep this discussion to the new iteration of the job. That being said, this does not mean that White Mage lacks off GCD heals. While they do have less total off GCD heals than Scholar and Astro, which are also on pretty long cooldowns comparatively, they are still strong. When looking at the total number of off GCD heals the healers have, White Mage has 5, Astro has 6, and Scholar has 8. A quick note for those who may be new to the game, off GCD heals are more efficient than GCD heals, and that is because they don't require a GCD to use. When you use a GCD heal, you're losing damage because you would be losing a glare, whereas an off GCD heal can do the same thing a GCD heal can do, but still keep you that glare, as well as usually being stronger. This may not matter to some people, which is completely fine, but for high level optimization of the healer role, this is pretty important. The main difference between the two are off GCD heals are more times than not long cooldowns, think 60, 90, and 120 second cooldowns, whereas GCD heals are spammable as long as your MP allows. If you want more insight on that, feel free to watch my healer optimization video. Let's get into the nitty gritty stuff. My experience from 74 to 80 was such a pleasurable experience. Now why 74 specifically? That's because you unlock Afflatus Misery, and oh boy isn't that a stupendous skill. I haven't had that much fun leveling a job in a very long time. Afflatus Solus feels so good to use, knowing that when I had to eventually GCD heal, I had this skill at my disposal, lowering the DPS loss on actually using said GCD heals, and in some situations giving me more damage back than I lost felt really satisfying. Combine that with it being instant cast and costing no MP, it felt like it really synergized with the White Mage toolkit. The change to Asylum is awesome because not only does it let you synergize with the other healers and their toolkits, it works on yours as well, increasing your already strong potency heals. Temperance is amazing and gives White Mage their first source of AoE mitigation. The only skill I am reserved on, even currently, is Afflatus Rapture. While it has no MP cost, which is probably the best factor about it, it just felt really weak unless paired with Planaria Indulgence, as alone it only heals for around 1/6 of the player's HP. It felt really weak, but I'll have to see how it feels in Savage content. That's not to say White Mage is perfect though. Let's start with the new White Mage skills and gimmicks. The new Lily system. Some people love it, some people hate it. Personally, I think it's good because it coexists with what White Mage has always been strong at. That's not to say they are perfect though, and I can see why people dislike them. The lilies now were created so when you had the GCD heal, you were less punished for it. This would be fine if fights actually require strenuous amounts of GCD healing. But because off GCD tools are so powerful, you can get by without using them a lot of the time. At that point, all lilies are is just a weaving tool. Hopefully this changes with Savage, which would make the lily mechanic incredibly valuable. At the moment, using these lilies in a coordinated environment is pretty much just used as a damage tool because under the right conditions it can be damage positive. I have two major issues with the lily system currently. The first one being, when you start a trial or raid you have 0 lilies and it feels pretty awful. Having to wait a full 30 seconds before you can even utilize this new trait doesn't sit right with me. At most, I feel like you should start a fight with one. The second problem is that it's all or nothing. Now what I mean by this is, when you use a lily, you have to use them 3 times to actually get the damage ability of Afflatus Misery, which mitigates the damage lost per heal. This is an issue to me because there were countless times where I felt forced to use 1 or 2 useless Afflatus skills to gain the Misery, but didn't heal anything because I just didn't have anything to heal. It felt to me that Misery should have scaled per lily you used. 1 lily used, 200 potency, 2 lilies, 500, 3 lilies, 900. This change would make the lilies feel even better to use, and I feel like it's a pretty necessary change. Afflatus Solus. I already said a lot about this skill, but I'll say it again. It feels really good to use, and I like how it just rolls with the White Mage toolkit. It being an instant cast cure too, and not requiring any MP is also good. My only issue with it is that it's 700 potency, and while that may seem strong, it feels a little underwhelming to me. But whatever route SE takes, I still think it's a good skill overall. This skill can also be used as a solution to weaving. To put into perspective, think of the skill as a 225 potency GCD at the minimum. I say minimum because Misery scales very fast with raid buffs. For example, just with Trick Attack alone it turns into a 990 potency attack. This will affect the value of your GCDs. Of course this isn't always plausible, which is why we give it a minimum value. When using these abilities as weaving spells, try to make the most of your situation. Double weaving is ideal as long as something is not wasted. Afflatus Rapture. Everything I said in the previous segment still holds true. I already said my reservations about the skill earlier, but I'll repeat it. Currently, I think Rapture is a little too weak, unless paired with Planaria Indulgence, but there's an issue I found myself in when trying to use Planaria plus Rapture, and that's finding a space to weave for Planaria. A lot of the time, I felt myself clipping my GCD to use it or using another Afflatus skill into Planaria, into Rapture, which just felt awful. I'm not sure what potency I would buff it to, but it would probably be the same as an Indom, which is 400 potency. Afflatus Misery. The best skill white mages have gotten in years. This skill is the reason why you can cast GCD heals, well, Afflatus GCDs, without actually losing straight damage. Once I unlocked this ability, I felt like white mage was a completed job already. Getting Miseries off during dungeon pulls felt super satisfying, and even if you blow all your lilies on nothing, assuming you don't have to GCD heal afterwards because you use them inefficiently, would still be a gain if it hits 2 or more targets. Misery also scales incredibly fast with raid buffs because of how big its potency is, due to most buffs in this game scaling multiplicatively. My only issue with Misery is that it doesn't scale per lily, which again means it's an all or nothing, since you need 3 lilies to get any sort of damage return. Traded Asylum is another one of my favorite changes to White Mage. Asylum now increases healing action potency by 10% to players who are inside the AoE. This means it affects Tetra, Divine Benison, Indom, Excog, Earthly Star, even its own ticks of Asylum. It also works on skills that aren't from healers like Equilibrium and Curing Waltz, basically any healing action. This adds some synergy between White Mage and the other healers and jobs. There's not too much to say about Temperance. It's our new and only healing increase aside from Asylum, which also grants a 10% mitigation source that's 30 yalms wide around yourself for 20 seconds. This is extremely strong, even when GCD heals aren't needed, simply because of the mitigation it applies. So even if you don't need any GCD healing in a fight, this skill still has a good share of uses. Planaria Indulgence got its effect changed entirely, and to be honest, I thought I was going to dislike it, but instead, I kind of like it. I think old Planaria that would have procced a Confession stack regardless of overheal would have been nicer, but this one gets the job done as well. The new Planaria now puts up a 10-second buff to you and your party, and procs a 200 potency heal every time you use Rapture, Medica 1 or 2, or Cure 3. It's important to note that this does not go away after one heal, it procs for every heal during the duration. Presence of Mind hasn't seen any changes, but I'm listing it because its duration is still 150 seconds, which is extremely awkward. As it stands, this cooldown is pretty much just a glorified 3-minute cooldown to line up with raid buffs unless you lose a usage in a fight holding it. Besides, it's still pretty much a DPS only ability. Because its cooldown is so short and its potency is so strong, you're better off doing a GCD heal than losing a use of it holding it for healing. This doesn't mean to ignore its healing purposes, because there are times where it lines up with AoE healing and can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Divine Benison actually got nerfed technically, but mainly because our healing has pretty much stayed the same since Stormblood, but player HP has been inflated. Divine Benison went from 20% of the HP of the target shield to a 500 potency shield. 500 potency is around a 15,000 HP shield, whereas using old Divine Benison would have been around 24,000. To change to it being potency, it can now be increased by skills that affect healing actions such as Min and Asylum. Tetragrammaton. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm kind of surprised we didn't get a charge ability for this. While it may or may not be needed, they attached one to Essential Dignity, which was probably for light speed, but I don't know, I feel like Tetragrammaton should definitely have a charge. I feel like it would feel pretty good. Medica 2 has seen a pretty significant change, now being 15 seconds long and ticking for 100 instead of 30 seconds and ticking for 50. The potency of the skill itself is still the same, but the cast time being reduced to 2.5 seconds on top of getting the potency faster makes it better than it was before. I don't even know why I'm even mentioning this, but Cure 1 has gotten its cast time reduced to 1.5 seconds. While it may seem good, you'll hardly ever, if ever, find yourself in a situation where you'll need to use this ability. With there being 2 tools already that are instant cast, Regen and Solace, as well as Cure 2 being significantly stronger, kind of makes this underwhelming. The difference between Physic and Cure is that Scholar doesn't already have 2 instant cast heals, which lowers the situations you'll find yourself using this. I think that's about it for the skills. I don't have too much to say about anything else. Holy is pretty good now, being base GCD recast time instead of 3 seconds, as well as having no drop off, which is good for large pools of enemies. Benediction is still a god tier ability. I only wish they would increase the responsiveness of it. Thin Air is pretty much the same. It's still really good for MP management and really good for using on raises, AoE heals, holy spam, even single target heals. There are some things I haven't mentioned, but mainly because we haven't seen Savage design yet, which is important since that will show some design flaws more than the EX trials will. Are there issues with White Mage? Yes, it's not perfect. Misery should be able to be used with 1 or 2 lilies, and weaving is still a potential issue even with Solace and Rapture, because our dot is now 30 seconds. And Fluid Ore is still in the game. Is White Mage too strong in the damage department? Maybe. We'll have to see how the other healers are from a raid DPS perspective though, so we can't say anything's too sure. Overall, I think White Mage is definitely the most fun I've had on a healer this expansion. Its basic but complex DPS toolkit with Glare, Dia, Assize, Presence of Mind, and Misery lead me to more DPS optimization scenarios than Scholar did. And healing dungeons was a blast because you just shredded everything. You don't have to heal if everything dies before it can do damage, right? Not only in dungeons did I find myself having fun, but even doing fates was fun. It was the first time in a long while I actually enjoyed the leveling process, so I am very pleased. Even if White Mage isn't meta or gets pushed out of the meta, one thing is for sure, it will still be the healer that is the most fun for me. I enjoy Scholar, don't get me wrong, and if White Mage's Scholar is meta I will still play it, but the DPS toolkit of White Mage, even if basic, still has hidden complexities to it which pull me in more than Scholar. To me, this is the best iteration of White Mage that we have gotten overall, only slightly ahead of Heavensward, and I can't wait to mess around with it in raid content. Thank you guys for watching my White Mage impressions video. Again, this is not a guide, this is just my first impressions of the job. Things can change, my impressions can change, my thoughts can change. If something, maybe a month from now I'll think differently. This is just how I feel currently, and I think White Mage is in a really good spot right now. Hopefully it stays that way. My next video will be probably a melee opener videos. I will not be leveling Astro next, and probably not for a while, just because I'm not really feeling Astro. It looks really bad right now, and I just can't. I don't want to be forced to level it. I just don't want to deal with it. But so I will get the melee stuff figured out soon. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys later. Peace out.